Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now this is the second video on the topic-wise MCQs on the chapter on the heart, and this is another few questions that we're going to discuss in this video. Getting to question number 35, the graph represents data on blood vessels and blood flow. So X, Y, and Z. You can see the three different graphs that they've given. So X is, let me give three different colors to it. So X is this one, and it's increasing, and then it increases, and then it's going to decrease. Then Y is this one, which is I'm drawing in yellow. This is Y. This was X. And then Z is this one, which is this one. Now it says which row correctly identifies the curves. Velocity of blood flow is that Y. Pressure of blood is that Z. Pressure of blood is decreasing. If we said Z, so that was this one. Pressure of blood is decreasing. It'll start from the heart, it will keep on decreasing as the blood goes away from the heart. And X is the total cross-sectional area. You see, what do we mean by total cross-sectional area? Now please understand this. I'm just going to draw this for you. So this is an artery total cross-sectional area. Then arteriole. Total cross-sectional area is now this. And this. And then capillaries. So this. So you see the total cross-sectional area is in the capillaries will be the biggest. Total cross-sectional area. Understand that. So the answer was C. Then coming on to 36, what occurs during ventricular systole in a mammalian heart? Aortic pressure increasing. Ventricular systole means when the ventricle contracts. So ventricle contracts. This is the right ventricle. This is the left ventricle. Right ventricle, left ventricle. They haven't said any, but just said generally. Ventricular systole. I told you systole is contract. When the ventricle contracts. So what is going to happen? Number one, aortic pressure will increase. Yes, because the left ventricle, the aorta rises. So aortic pressure increases. And ventricular pressure increases. Yes, ventricle contracts, so ventricle will exert pressure on the blood. Atrial pressure does not change, but it doesn't matter because actually ventricle contracts when these valves are closed. The atrioventricular valves are closed. This is closed and this is closed. So we're not concerned with the atria. So the answer was 1 and 3. Question number 37. The diagram shows a defect in the walls between the atria. You can see here this area. So the right and the left atrium, there is a connection which has not been closed. That happens when a baby is born, that closes up automatically, but sometimes it doesn't close. So diagram shows a defect in the walls between the atria. What effect would this defect have on the blood circulatory system? Naturally, blood from this atria will go into this atria because the pressure, the pulmonary vein as it comes here, this blood is going to go into this. So this is going to be this is oxygenated blood. Because pulmonary vein is bringing oxygenated blood from the lungs. So this will go here. And this will go again to the lungs and then come back again. But then the aorta, the blood going into the aorta will be less oxygenated. So reduced oxygen saturation of hemoglobin. And coming on to 38, which will not be formed in the plasma and capillaries surrounding active tissues. Which will not, you have to realize is which answer is the wrong one. The other three are all correct. So not be formed in the plasma and capillaries. You see, in the plasma what happens and what happens in the red blood cells. So carbaminohemoglobin will only be found inside the red blood cell, not in the plasma. They're saying in the plasma. You don't read the question when you're making a mistake in this. So plasma में कहाँ से होगा? Where will hemoglobin be in the plasma? Hemoglobin is inside the red blood cell. Then coming on to question number 39. A number of different tissues occur in the walls of major blood vessels. Which row correctly identifies the main tissues found in the three layers of the wall of an artery? You know, intima has to be endothelium, so it has to be either A or C. We've done this question before as well. Very interesting question. 40. The diagram shows pressure changes in various structures of the right side of the heart. Previous diagrams were on the left side of the heart. So this I used to tell you was the aorta, but the aorta arises from the left ventricle. Which vessel arises from the right ventricle? So Y has to be that one, and that has to be the pulmonary artery. And then this has to be X, has to be the right ventricle. So X was this one. That was the left ventricle in the other diagram. And then the Z is the right atrium. If you know this graph, I'm sure you can do this, but you have to understand is you've got to see the labeling on the left side and then again on the right side. Which statement is true for the Bohr effect? Well, you have to understand the Bohr effect is when more CO2 is present in actively respiring muscles, then the carbon dioxide concentration increases and the oxygen dissociation curve shifts to the right, and which means that the hemoglobin oxygen friendship decreases and the hemoglobin gives up its oxygen. The word affinity is used. I use the word friendship so that it's clear to you all. The release of oxygen from hemoglobin is more likely at higher partial pressures of carbon dioxide. That was the answer to this. Then coming on to question number 42. Aortic stenosis is a heart valve disorder in which the aortic semilunar valve opening is narrow. Which effect could aortic stenosis have on heart structure and function? So aortic, they've told you, they explained this in the question, is it's a heart valve disorder in which the aortic semilunar valve. So this is the heart, this is the aorta coming out, and the semilunar valve here is narrower. Which effect could aortic stenosis have on heart structure and function? Yeah, because it'll have to, the left ventricle wall will have to work much more. So the wall of the left ventricle thickens, leading to an enlarged heart and inability to relax and fill completely during diastole. Because now the left ventricle has to work more because the passage through which the blood was passing now is narrower, so it has to overcome higher resistance and it has to exert more force, and the ventricle has to contract more forcefully. The diagram shows the effect of three different concentrations of carbon dioxide on the oxygen dissociation curve for human hemoglobin. Now you can say X is 3.0 kPa. So carbon dioxide, then Y is 5 kPa, and then Z is 7 kPa. So 3, 5, and 7. 3, 5, and 7. Now always I tell you is draw a line and see what is happening. So at 7 it is the least percentage saturated. At 5 it is a little better, and then at X it is more saturated. So what effect does carbon dioxide have on hemoglobin? It makes it less efficient at taking up oxygen and more efficient at releasing it. So it is releasing it and the percentage saturation is decreasing. 5, 6, and 7 are different carbon dioxide partial pressures. So more the carbon dioxide partial pressure, more the hemoglobin oxygen friendship decreases and it gives up its oxygen. 44. Why does the number of red blood cells in a human increase after several weeks at high altitude? Is why. What it says, why does the number of increase? To supply the tissues with enough oxygen. Yes, we know that at high altitudes the partial pressure of oxygen is low, but it didn't say that what it is the reason for the number of red bloods. It says why does the number increase after several weeks at high altitude? Is because, and this is wrong, high partial pressure nahi hota, it's a less partial pressure of oxygen. Red blood cells are short lived, that's everywhere. To remove glucose from the tissue is rubbish. So that more oxygen can be supplied to the tissues as the partial pressure is decreasing. Question 45. The graph shows the pressure changes in the left atrium, left ventricle, and aorta during a cardiac cycle. Now you can see again, I've done this again and again. Left ventricle is this one, right? Aorta is this one, and left atrium is this one. So this was given in the key. With reference to the semilunar valve and atrioventricular valve, what is happening at points 1, 2, 3, and 4? I told you 1 is important because this is the aorta. When will the pressure in the aorta increase? When the aortic valve opens here at this point. Aortic valve closes here at point 2. At 1, the aortic valve opens. At 2, the aortic valve closes. So aortic valves are semilunar valves. So 1, semilunar valves open. 2 closes. Atrioventricular valves open at 3, closes at 3, opens at 4. So you have to understand this. Then coming to question number 46. Normal venous pressure in the feet is 3.3 kPa. When a person stands very still, venous blood pressure in the feet rises to 5 kPa. What causes the high pressure? Yeah, because when you're standing still, the skeletal muscle in the legs are not squeezing blood upwards in the veins. And I teach you this when I'm telling you about this, how in the army, when they are asked to stand still for a long time, they're supposed to wiggle their toes. Otherwise, people fall down because less blood returning to the heart, less blood going to the brain. And finally, the person, the brain detects that and the effect of gravity is finished. As soon as you fall down, effect of gravity is finished. So this is what you have to understand, is that the skeletal muscles in the legs are not squeezing blood upwards in the veins, because if you're standing still, when a person stands very still, and that's what the people in the army are told to do. Then question number 47. Some people find it difficult to breathe out large volumes of air from their lungs. Their breathing is noisy and rapid. Which diseases are likely suffering from? Yes, that would be emphysema, because you have problems with less surface area for gas exchange, and all the elastic tissue in the alveoli is being destroyed, so less elastic recoil. 48. Which of the following can result in heart failure? 1, 3, and 4. 1 is increased blood pressure, 3 is reduced oxygen supply to the cardiac muscle, and 4 is increased risk of blood clotting. This is now been actually removed from the syllabus. Which of the following are found in all blood vessels, lymph, and tissue fluid? You have to know that antibodies are present in all. Carbon dioxide is present in the plasma, so all blood vessels, lymph, and tissue fluid. So all 4 of them: carbon dioxide, glucose, white blood cells, and antibodies. In some questions, this antibodies is labeled as protein. So remember this, when they ask protein, it's antibodies. The diagram shows the Bohr effect. What causes the shift from X to Y? Increased concentration of carbon dioxide and low pH. Naturally, more the carbonic acid, more the pH is lowered. Question 51. The graph shows the pressure changes in different areas of the left side of the heart during one cardiac cycle. Again, the same graph which we never understood in O levels, but in A levels, I hope it is more clear to you all. Which row shows the pressure changes in each part of the heart? You know the X is the aorta, Y is the ventricle, and Z is the atrium. So we've done this a number of times. You need to go through this graph again. I will be showing you this graph again at the end. It says 2 different pictures of it so that you can pause and watch these graphs again. Question 52, the stroke volume. So stroke volume is the volume of blood pumped by each contraction of a ventricle. The ventricular end diastolic volume means the volume of the when the blood is being pumped out, what is left behind. The volume is called end diastolic volume, EDV. Is the volume of blood in the ventricle just before systole. So when the diastole means relaxing, there is still a little bit of blood left behind. And that, of course, results in the diastolic blood pressure. And that, if it is high, is not a very good sign. Which graph shows the relationship between the stroke volume and the ventricular and diastolic volume? So ventricular and diastolic volume and stroke volume. So more the stroke volume, the less will be the end diastolic volume. So now they've given you stroke volume and the ventricular end diastolic volume. So the answer was D. In this question, what you have to realize is that if the volume increases, the ventricular end diastolic volume, if that increases, ventricular end diastolic volume increases, so will the stroke volume increase, because that is at the end just before systole. So if ventricular end diastole volume increases, so will the stroke volume increase. More blood will be pumped out per ventricle per contraction. Then which component of tobacco smoke causes an increase in blood pressure, sorry, nicotine. Number 54, the diagram shows pressure changes in the aorta, left atrium, left ventricle during the cardiac cycle. Again, the same graph. Now it says, but this now question is a little different. Which row explains the changes in the left ventricle at different times on the graph? So region of graph between 1 and 2. So this is between 1 and 2 is this time. Muscle of the ventricle wall is contracting and volume of the left ventricle is constant. Why is that constant? Because what has happened? These valves are closed, the atrioventricular valves and the semilunar valves are also closed. So the ventricle is a closed chamber at this time, and the muscle is contracting and putting pressure on it, and then suddenly you will see that the semilunar valve of the aorta will open and blood will start flowing into the aorta, and that is the point which you see here in the blood flowing into the aorta, and the aorta, this is the graph of the aorta. Which row shows changes in concentration in the red blood cells when carbon dioxide diffuses from respiring cells? Carbonic anhydrase is an enzyme, there's going to be no change in that. Hydrogen carbonate ions will increase and hydrogen ions will increase. So when carbon dioxide diffuses from respiring cells, so more CO2 combines with water to form carbonic acid dissociates into H ions and HCO3 negative ions. H ions combine with the hemoglobin to form hemoglobinic acid, and the HCO3 negative ions diffuse into the plasma. Coming to question number 56. The following are all structural components of blood vessels: collagen, elastic, endothelial, smooth muscle. Which row shows the distribution of these components in different blood vessels? So there's only artery and vein. So all of them are present in both of them. All of them have it. Some less, some more. Endothelium is of course present in all. So 1, 2, 3 and 4. The answer was C. Which components of blood are present in tissue fluid? We've done this question before as well. Phagocytes, proteins. Proteins here we mean antibodies. Proteins here we mean antibodies. Whenever you're stuck on a question, look at the exam report. Then it says cardiovascular disease said to be multifactorial. What does this mean? You can get the disease if you are exposed to one or more risk factors. We don't do this anymore. Which feature enables the aorta to withstand high pressure at ventricular systole? Is the collagen fibers and the elastin fibers. Collagen fibers. Endometrium is in the uterus. Sorry, it's never in blood vessels. Elastin fibers, large lumen, no. Smooth muscle and small lumen, no. 60. There is a decreased partial pressure of oxygen at high altitude compared to sea level. Which row is a correct description and reason for the response of the body in high altitude? Percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen lung decreases, so more red blood cells are produced to carry more hemoglobin. Then what events occur during contraction of the left ventricle? The pressure in the left ventricle becomes greater than the pressure of the aorta. Naturally, the aortic valves open, or the semilunar valves at the base of the aorta open. Question 62. Blood tissue and lymph each have a different combination. Which row shows the composition of lymph? It contains water, it contains antibodies, and contains a lot of lipids. Lacteals join to form the lymphatics. Then, of course, we have question number 63. Which of the tissues type below are present in the walls of all blood vessels? Again, we have this favorite question coming in again and again. Naturally, it's number 3, which is the endothelium. Capillaries only have the endothelium. Question 64. In mammals, some carbon dioxide is transported by red blood cells in combination with hemoglobin. What is the product of this combination? Carb-aminohemoglobin. Please, not carboxy, that's carbon monoxide. Hemoglobinic acid, no. Carbonic acid, no. It actually, what is the product of this combination? So only the carbon dioxide and water combines to form carbonic acid. Yes, but they didn't ask you that question. They said in mammals, some carbon dioxide is transported by red blood cells in combination with hemoglobin. That's only carb-aminohemoglobin. Then question 65, the graph shows pressure changes during a cardiac cycle. Again, same question. And what was W, X, Y, and Z? So you're all figuring this out. This has come in a previous question as well. Question 66, some babies are born with a hole between the right and left atria. These newly born babies are found to have an increased number of red blood cells. What is the reason? There is less oxygen available to the newly born baby. We've done this again in a previous question. Question 67, in some cases where a person has lung disease, the partial pressure of oxygen in the pulmonary veins is less than the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli. Which could contribute to the description above? The answer is 1, 2, and 4. A high proportion of alveoli collapse and do not have enough alveolar capillaries. Number 2, the degree of alveolar ventilation is too low for the cardiac output supplying most of the alveoli. And the rate of diffusion of oxygen from the alveolar air to the surrounding alveolar capillaries is too slow. So that was the answer was 1, 2, and 4. Then question number 68. Which of the effects listed occur as a result of inhaling both carbon monoxide and nicotine from cigarette smoke? 1 and 2, increased heart rate and increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Question 69. What is systolic blood pressure? It is the maximum blood pressure in the arteries. Which is systolic, I say, is when the ventricle contracts and pushes the blood into the aorta. And then, of course, the aorta, all the arteries of the body, except the pulmonary artery, all the arteries of the body, renal artery, hepatic artery, intestinal artery, carotid artery, all of them arise from the aorta. So the maximum blood pressure in the arteries, that is the systolic blood pressure. Question number 70. Aortic stenosis is a heart valve disorder in which the aortic semilunar valve opening is narrow. So we've done this before. The wall of the left ventricle thickens, leading to an enlarged heart and inability to relax and fill completely during this diastole. 71. The trace represents the electrical activity of the heart during a single heartbeat, PQRST, which letter identifies the flow of current through the atria and the recovery of the ventricle walls. So of course you can see P would be this one, which is in the beginning of the heartbeat, and ventricular walls would be the end of it, because the recovery of the ventricle walls. The cardiac cycle involves what? First the atria contracting, and then of course ventricles filling up, and then the ventricles contracting and pushing the blood out of the ventricles. So it was P and T. This is of course a very early paper, June 10, so it's not a very new paper, and we do not really teach you this much, but I think it was a general question. So you checked how well you knew this. So that completes this chapter, and I hope these MCQs are going to help you in solving the MCQs on this chapter. And thank you for watching, and thank you very much.